say about me. I love to sing and I love women.
Dean Martin had everything a man could dream of: fame, money, and non-stop admiration from millions around the world. He was the definition of cool, the smooth voice behind timeless songs, the effortless charm that ruled Hollywood's golden era. But behind that relaxed smile and the glass he casually held on stage, his private world was quietly falling apart. The truth is, Dean Martin's final years looked nothing like the legend people worshipped. He slowly became a shadow of who he once was, weighed down by memories and personal loss, while being quietly watched over by the woman who loved him more than anyone else ever had. Jean Martin had been his wife for 24 years, and even after their split, she never fully walked away. While the public saw an untouchable icon, Jean saw the cost of fame, the isolation, the regret, and the emotional weight that followed him everywhere. Their story started with glamour and bright lights, but it ended in a reality too heavy to ignore. It was a story of love, loyalty, and slow unraveling, something even Hollywood couldn't clean up with a script. This is the final chapter of Dean Martin and the woman who stood by, watching him fade from the man he once was, from Steubenville to stardom. But Dean Martin's journey didn't begin in a mansion or on a movie set. It began on the rough, gray streets of Steubenville, Ohio, a steel town pressed against the banks of the Ohio River. He was born Dino Paul Crocetti on June 7, 1917, the son of two Italian immigrants chasing their own version of the American dream. His father, Gaetano, arrived from Abruzzo, Italy in 1913 and opened a small barber shop, while his mother, Angela, a first-generation Italian-American, filled their home with music and singing. Their house overflowed with food, laughter, and old-world traditions. But money was always tight and English was barely spoken. When Dino finally entered school, he couldn't understand a single word the teacher said. His thick accent made him an easy target. Kids mocked him, copied his speech, and laughed at his broken English. Years later, he joked that he was too smart for school, but the real reason was simple. He felt alone. By the 10th grade, he dropped out completely, convinced real-life lessons weren't found in a classroom. And those lessons hit fast. He worked wherever he could: steel mills, gas stations, delivering milk, and running illegal liquor during Prohibition. During that same period, he boxed under the name Kid Crochet. Scrappy, tough, and stubborn. He fought 12 matches and only won one.
Jerry Lewis, he was using recorded music, and Jerry was backstage messing with that. Loused him.
I won all but 11, he later joked, hiding the bruises behind humor. Those fights left marks: a crooked nose, busted lips, scarred hands. Years later, after fame found him, Lou Costello paid to fix his nose, a small move that helped shape the iconic image everyone recognized. Back then, Dino shared a tiny New York apartment with fellow entertainer Sonny King. They were broke but clever. When cash ran dry, they staged bare-knuckle fights right in their living room, charging $5 a ticket. On good nights, they made $50, just enough to scrape by. On bad nights, they pretended to take phone calls at diners, stealing bites from abandoned plates just to survive. It was during these broke, grind-heavy years that Dean Martin's natural charm finally started to peek through. While working odd jobs, including crew work at an illegal casino hidden behind a tobacco shop, he would quietly sing between card games just to pass the time. Gamblers stopped mid-hand to listen, and one night, band leader Ernie McKay overheard him and knew instantly this kid had something special. He offered Dean a singing job on the spot, and with one yes, everything changed. At first, he performed under the name Dino Martini, inspired by Italian tenor Nino Martini. Touring through Ohio and Pennsylvania, he sharpened his sound and stage presence night after night. By 1940, he landed a spot with bandleader Sammy Watkins, who gave him advice that flipped his future upside down. "You've got the voice, kid," he said, "but if you want to go far, drop the I. Make it Dean Martin." It sounded cleaner, smoother, and more American, and that small tweak changed everything. From that moment on, the name Dean Martin started to stick. It rolled off the tongue, easy to remember, hard to forget. What he didn't know yet was how much pressure, temptation, and emotional chaos that name would eventually carry. Love, marriage, and heartbreak were all waiting just around the corner. By the early 1940s, his life finally felt like it was moving upward. He had the voice, the charm, and the hunger to make it big. What he didn't have was balance, and that came in 1941 when he met Betty McDonald, a warm, grounded woman from Ohio who fell for him before the spotlight ever found him. She loved Dino, not the image. They married that same year, long before his name meant anything to the public. Those early years weren't glamorous at all. Nights were filled with tiny clubs, unpaid gigs, and constant doubt about whether the dream would ever pay off. While Dean chased stages and smoky lounges, Betty held things down at home, becoming his emotional anchor. Together they built a family, welcoming 4 children over the years: Craig, Claudia, Gail, and Dina. Dean made crowds smile with ease, but off stage he was just a young dad hustling to survive. As his popularity grew, so did the pressure. Dean was charming but restless, and fame started pulling him in hard. Attention came nonstop, and with it, temptations that tested the marriage every step of the way. At the same time, Betty struggled deeply with alcohol issues, sometimes disappearing for days, leaving cracks that only widened over time. Hollywood whispers followed Dean everywhere, but the press rarely touched his image. He stayed the smooth gentleman, always smiling, always joking, always holding a drink. But behind closed doors, the damage was already done. By 1949, the marriage officially fell apart. Dean filed for divorce and was granted custody of all 4 children, a rare outcome for that era. Betty quietly moved to San Francisco, stepping away from the noise and the fame that was only getting louder. Meanwhile, Dean Martin kept climbing, unaware that the emotional cost of success was just getting started. She lived out the rest of her life quietly, far from cameras and headlines, long after Dean Martin had moved on, though his name never fully stopped following her. Years passed, but the shadow of his fame always lingered nearby, even when she wanted nothing to do with it. Just 1 week after the divorce papers were finalized, Dean married again, this time to Jean Beager, a model and former Orange Bowl queen. Their wedding on September 1st, 1949, turned into a full Hollywood moment, complete with flashing cameras and insiders watching closely. His partner, Jerry Lewis, stood beside him as best man, sealing the image of success and confidence. Jean was elegant, loyal, and deeply devoted, and for a while it looked like Dean had finally found stability. She stood by him through his biggest wins, the hit comedy films with Jerry, his rise as a solo star, and his growing reputation as one of entertainment's smoothest figures. Together, they had 3 children, Dean Paul, Richie, and Gina, expanding an already complicated family. Jean didn't just raise her own kids, she raised all 7 of Dean's children, hers and Betty's, under one roof. To the outside world, they looked like the perfect American family, glamorous, united, smiling for every photo. But fame has never been a steady foundation, and cracks were already forming beneath the surface. As Dean's career exploded, his time at home faded fast. Nights stretched longer, tours pulled him away, and temptation followed him everywhere. Jean forgave him more times than she could count, hoping each promise meant real change. But by the late 1960s, the weight became too heavy. In 1973, after 24 years together, the marriage came to an end. Dean would marry once more, but everyone close to him knew the truth. Jean had been the one who truly held his world together. Losing her left a gap that success could never fill. Meanwhile, Dean faced another turning point, his split from Jerry Lewis in 1956. Many critics swore his career was finished. They labeled him the straight man who couldn't stand alone. But Dean flipped the narrative fast and proved everyone wrong. Within 2 years, he rebuilt himself, not as a sidekick, but as one of the coolest, most magnetic entertainers in America. His comeback ignited in Las Vegas, where he joined forces with Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., Joey Bishop, and Peter Lawford. Together they became known as Rat Pack, smooth-talking, sharp-witted performers who turned the Las Vegas Strip into their personal playground night after night. Their shows at the Sands Hotel sold out fast, fueled by chemistry, quick jokes, and effortless confidence. To fans, they represented pure class and swagger. Dean looked like the wildest of them all, cigarette in one hand, drink in the other, tie loose, grin crooked. But that image was mostly smoke and mirrors. His drink was often just apple juice, not alcohol. The slurred words and lazy humor were part of a carefully crafted act, so convincing that even Sinatra once admitted, "Dean fooled everyone." He was the only one staying sharp behind the scenes. But while the persona built a legend, it also created distance. People stopped seeing Dean as a real man. He became an idea, the king of cool, the symbol of effortless confidence, even when, deep down, he felt anything but. Behind the curtain, Dean Martin was nothing like the image people adored. He was quiet, pulled back, and often deeply alone. He didn't hang around late-night parties or gamble until sunrise like Frank Sinatra. Most nights, once the show ended, Dean went straight home, turned on the TV, and fell asleep by himself. No noise, no crowd, no spotlight. Still, his presence was undeniable. When he stepped onto a movie set, the doubts vanished fast. His performances in films like Rio Bravo and The Young Lions shut critics up completely. He showed real depth, emotional weight, and range nobody expected from the so-called lounge singer. Hollywood tried to box him in, but Dean cracked that box wide open. Then came The Dean Martin Show in 1965, and everything shifted again. NBC wanted his charm on television, but Dean played by his own rules. He demanded no rehearsals, only one filming day per week, and full ownership of the show after its first broadcast. Industry insiders thought he was crazy, and then NBC agreed anyway. The result was massive. 264 episodes, more than 40 million viewers every week, and a television empire built purely on Dean's effortless cool. Every time he walked on stage, it looked like he hadn't prepared at all. And that was the magic. He was loose, relaxed, and completely himself. But the higher he climbed, the emptier things felt inside. The laughter, the applause, the glamorous circle, it was real, but it never lasted. Dean once said, "If you have luck, you don't have to be smart, but luck runs out." And by the late 1970s, something inside him started to dim. Then came the moment that changed everything. In March 1987, Dean's world shattered when his son, Dean Paul Martin, was lost in a tragic aviation accident during severe weather in California. He was just 35. Dean Paul wasn't just his son. He was his pride, his golden boy, the one he felt closest to without ever needing words. Dean had survived divorce, pressure, and non-stop attention, but nothing prepared him for this. After that loss, he pulled away completely. Friends said the light never returned. He stopped smiling the same way, stopped chasing the stage, and stopped caring about fame altogether. His longtime friend Rich Little later said that once Dean lost his son, something inside him shut down for good. At the time, Dean was supposed to headline a major tour with Sammy Davis Jr. and Sinatra, a massive Rat Pack reunion called The Ultimate Event. It was meant to be legendary, but after what happened, Dean couldn't carry it. He showed up for the first few performances, distant and hollow, barely there. Then he walked away mid-tour. Sinatra tried to push him back on stage, but Dean refused flat out. That's when Jean, his former wife, stepped back into his life, even though they'd been divorced for years. She didn't force conversations or demand attention. She simply stayed nearby, checking on him, quietly sharing meals in the same restaurants where he sat alone night after night. She didn't intrude, she didn't push, she just stayed, the one person who still knew how to reach him when the world no longer could. She watched over him quietly, faithfully, as he slowly slipped away from the world he once ruled. That painful year marked the moment Dean Martin truly lost his spark. To the public, he was still the smooth legend who sang "Everybody Loves Somebody," but those close to him saw a man weighed down by overwhelming sorrow. His line, "I'm just waiting," wasn't humor. It was honesty, spoken from a place of deep exhaustion. After 1987, Dean faded from public life almost completely. He stopped performing, stopped socializing, and spent most nights alone in quiet Beverly Hills restaurants. And almost always Jean sat nearby, never interrupting, never pushing, just watching, the same way she always had. Words were no longer necessary. It felt like she couldn't stop protecting him, even when there was nothing left to fix. The man who once filled rooms with laughter now lived in near silence, surrounded by memories that refused to let go. By the early 1990s, his health began to decline. Years of smoking finally caught up with him, and doctors urged serious medical treatment. Dean refused without hesitation. "I've had a good life," he told friends, a simple sentence carrying decades of loss, fatigue, and acceptance. His days became quiet, spent with old photographs, television reruns, and memories of his son that never stopped replaying. The entertainer who once owned the spotlight now lived far from it, waiting without resistance, without fear, just tired. On December 25, 1995, Dean Martin passed away at the age of 78 due to severe breathing complications. The news shook Hollywood to its core. Frank Sinatra, devastated, called Dean a brother, not by blood, but by choice. Their bond ran deeper than fame. Just days later, Las Vegas stood still. For 10 full minutes, the lights on the Strip dimmed, a rare honor reserved only for legends. The sands, the flamingo, the stardust, all went dark in silence. The city Dean helped define paused to honor the man who made it shine. Dean was laid to rest at Westwood Village Memorial Park in Los Angeles. His resting place carries a simple inscription, a lyric from his most famous song, "Everybody Loves Somebody Sometime." Jean never remarried. For years, she lived quietly, surrounded by photos of Dean and their children. In 2016, she also passed on after a long illness at the age of 89. She was laid to rest not far from him, close, just as she had always been. Their son, Richie, who devoted his life to protecting and preserving his father's music, was lost just weeks before Jean, another painful chapter for a family that had already endured so much. The Martin family gave the world joy, laughter, and unforgettable music. But behind the spotlight lived a story filled with loyalty, heartbreak, and emotional scars fame could never hide. Dean Martin spent his final years not surrounded by applause, but by silence, and by the quiet devotion of a woman who never stopped loving him. Jean watched him fade. Powerless to change the moment, everything shifted, the day they lost their son. In the end, she followed him, closing a love story that began in bright lights and ended in shadow. Their names are etched in Hollywood history, but their story is one of pain, loyalty, and loss, the kind success can't erase.